Ever been to the zoo and like thought, man, what does it actually take to keep all this running? You see the penguins and the lions just out there, but there's a whole hidden world of people like zoo curators making it happen.
Right.
So that's our deep dive today, Zoo Curators. And spoiler alert, it's not all just playing with pandas.
Definitely not.
We're going off of RoleCatcher for this, by the way. It's got tons of info for anyone job hunting or even just curious about, what the job's really like.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. Most people think curators are like up to their elbows in animal care 24/7.
Right, which is part of it.
Oh, for sure. But there's this whole management side people don't realize.
So not just those cute baby animal pics for Instagram.
Not quite. Think of it this way. The curator is kind of like the CEO of the zoo's whole animal population. They've got budgets, a whole team of specialists, even government rules, all on their shoulders.
From rules. That doesn't sound very cuddly. What's that about?
It's all to make sure the animals are good, even for stuff like just moving them around. Say there's a rhino coming from another zoo across the country.
Yeah, can't just, put it on a plane.
Nope. There's strict rules and permits so the animal's safe the whole trip.
It's crazy how much goes on that we, as visitors, never even think about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was just one example. Curators also work on things like breeding endangered animals, designing their habitats, even working with the education teams to make sure the visitors have a good experience.
So you need a pretty diverse skill set for this. The RoleCatcher guide mentioned being good at science, obviously, but also communication, leadership, even tech stuff these days.
Oh, yeah. It's changing so fast, especially with all the new tech. Curators use data now to keep track of how the animals are doing, manage those breeding programs we talked about, and even things like VR and AR in exhibits.
Speaking of tech, did you see RoleCatcher has that AI interview prep thing?
Yeah.
It's wild. You
Yeah.
practice interview questions, and an AI tells you how you did. We're going to have robots interviewing zookeepers soon.
It's not that crazy, honestly. AI is getting really big for hiring. Maybe not a full-on robot interview yet, but companies use it to look at resumes, see how candidates answer questions, even predict how well they'll do the job.
Wow, so you might need to be as good with algorithms as you are with, Veradvarks.
It shows you got to be ready for anything and willing to learn new tech, even in a job so connected to nature.
Makes you think about how much tech's already changing zoos, which actually reminds me of something else RoleCatcher said. All those pictures of curators bonding with cute baby animals. Probably not the everyday.
Right. There's definitely a not-so-glamorous side most people don't see.
So what are some of those, less fun parts of being a zoo curator they don't put on the posters?
Well, first off, it's a lot of work, physically and emotionally. I mean, you're there long hours, weekends, holidays sometimes. Animals don't exactly clock out at 5.
Right, emergencies probably pop up, babies born at weird times. Someone's got to be on call.
Exactly. And it's not just being there, it's how much you care. You get attached to these animals, so dealing with them being sick or when one dies or even just the everyday stuff, it wears on you.
RoleCatcher talked about that emotional toll, but I bet you don't really get it till you've been there. Any situations that were, especially tough that come to mind?
Oh, absolutely. There's this one young giraffe. He had a really bad leg fracture. Whole team working around the clock, but
Yeah.
we couldn't save him. It's always rough, those moments, but it shows you how much compassion you need in this job and how to keep going.
Always balancing, huh? The good stuff with knowing those tough parts are going to happen when you work with living creatures.
Exactly. Hope and reality all the time. And speaking of balancing, RoleCatcher brought up something else tricky. The whole ethics side of zoos.
Yeah, even if everyone's trying their best, there's always that question of keeping wild animals, captive.
It's complicated, no easy answers. Zoos now are really into conservation, education, making the habitats more natural. But is it really okay to keep them enclosed, even if it protects them or teaches people about them?
I bet every zoo person asks themselves that at some point.
Oh, yeah. It's a constant conversation in the zoo world. We're always looking at what we do, doing research, trying to improve.
Well, that's good to hear, because you've got this chance to get people excited about saving animals, show them creatures they'd never see otherwise.
Yeah.
But you gotta make sure those animals are actually living well, not just existing.
Finding that sweet spot, yeah. Education, conservation, and what's best for the animal all at once.
And the curator's right in the middle of it all, making the calls that affect those animals every day.
Yep. And those decisions, like we've been saying, they're not always clear-cut.
So we've covered the tough stuff,
Hmm.
the hours, the emotional side, the ethics. But what about the good stuff? What makes it all worth it?
Oh, tons of stuff. I mean, it boils down to working with these amazing animals, being part of saving them, like looking a gorilla in the eye, seeing a baby rhino born when it's endangered. Those stick with you.
I bet. And knowing you're helping them have a future, that's got to be powerful.
Yeah, it really is. And then there's the teaching part, too. Seeing kids get excited at the zoo, you realize you're getting them hooked on wildlife.
Creating the next wave of conservationists. And speaking of paths, RoleCatcher talked about how to actually get into this career. What would you tell someone listening who's like, okay, this is awesome, but how do I do to it?
It's competitive, no doubt. But if you're serious about it, totally worth it. You need that science background, zoology, biology, that kind of thing. But don't underestimate just getting your hands dirty.
Like what, specifically?
Volunteer at shelters, internships at zoos. Even if it's cleaning up or making food, it all teaches you something.
Shows you're dedicated, not just there for the Instagram. RoleCatcher mentioned building a portfolio, so it's more than just grades.
Way more. Put in your own projects, volunteer stuff, even photography if you're good at it. Zoos want visitors to have a good time. Those skills matter too.
Right. What about the interview itself? Any tips? I'd be nervous, even without the whole AI thing we talked about.
Be yourself, be excited, and be ready to talk about the good A&D bad parts of the job. Show them you're not just there for the cute animal selfies.
Good advice. Prove you're ready to jump into all the craziness, the good, and the hard parts of working with animals. This has been eye-opening for sure. Busted some myths, thought about the ethics, maybe even inspired some future zookeepers.
That'd be great. There's always room for more passionate people in this field.
Totally. And anyone listening who wants the details, RoleCatcher's the place. Career guides, that AI interview practice, super helpful.
Can't go wrong with checking them out.
This whole deep dive behind the scenes of zoos has been wild. Animal care, ethics, tech, who knew? But one thing's for sure, zoo curators are super important for conservation, education, making sure those animals have the best lives possible.
You said it. It's got its tough parts, but like you said, it's so rewarding.
Couldn't agree more. That's a wrap on this deep dive, but one last thought to leave you with. We talked tech-changing zoos. But what about how our understanding of animals changes? They think, they communicate. Should zoos change to match that? Something to chew on till our next deep dive.